So our first poet needs no introduction. So, right from the get-go, in the beginning of the Fisher Poets, she was there. Been a Fisher woman since '86. Has been putting out the zine, Extra Tough, since '96. And you know how I said that some people, this is their one time on stage, and that they have to really get up the courage to be here. Well, that's not her, right? She does it all the time. She oozes courage, and if you're making noise, she'll probably just come back there and kick your butt. So, Bowstern, here she is in the flesh.
Thanks, Wayne. Thanks, folks. In that wee dark engine room, where the cold seeps through your soul, how we huddled around that wee pot stove that burns oily rags and coal. Do you guys know what that song's about? It's about sitting on an island in the southern seas waiting for the whaling fleet to come back. It's about wintering over in just north of the Antarctic seas. And those men would winter over together, and they would sit around that little stove. And that song, I learned it from a Gordon Bach record. Gordon's been here a couple of times. And I don't know if you guys know that we've got guests from the Oregon Public Broadcasting radio show State of Wonder, and they're going to be here tomorrow. And they asked me what FisherPoets is all about, and they actually were like, I was emceeing an event in Portland on Wednesday night, and they said, at the beginning of the show, after they asked me for a handwritten receipt, they said, can you give us a sentence about what FisherPoets means to you? And I was like, sure. Well, when do you guys need it? And they're like, by the break would be fine. And so I've been thinking about it, and I tried to get the crowd to join in, and I'm just going to keep talking about what FisherPoets is about, and it's a little bit about coming together to huddle around our communities and our stories and each other and our culture. And it's that space between when I breathe in to sing or talk and you lean in to listen. And the FisherPoets is the container that kind of holds that space for all of us, is what I think. And I also read this sentence. I was like, well, I have this sentence that I wrote last year when I got invited to be part of something called the First 100 Days, and about 20 of us wrote for the first 100 days of our current administration, starting from the inauguration, and we just wrote stuff down, and then this activist named Amy Harwood compiled selections of it into this book, which I have a copy of. And I'm writing, this is a little excerpt of that from February 21, day 33, 2017. When I was talking about anxiety that I was just having throughout the day, and I said, or is my anxiety connected to the event I'm hosting tomorrow night, where people will be reading prose and poetry on the theme of commercial fishing? Lest one dismiss the evening as some yo-ho-ho fest, let us remember that the Bering Sea ate a 90-foot Seattle-based crabber last weekend, disappearing the sound boat and all 6 of her experienced crew after only a blip from the EPIRB, the emergency positioning indicating radio beacon. We anticipate some heavy seas, let's say. I've been performing a bunch this month, and it's interesting to me how hungry audiences are for outrage from the stage, to hear people on the microphone take a stand. Even more interesting to me is how small of a stand is taken to great applause. It's definitely informed my intentions regarding my own event, or at least one I am co-hosting with Lara Messersmith-Glavin. I'd like to take a strong stand on the mic, and I expect to be speaking to the choir, although I don't know how everybody feels, but I do know that people here are of good manners and diplomats and good friends, and so I am not too worried. I know you would be disappointed in me if I did not speak up for my beliefs and for the basic civil rights all humans should enjoy. Fishing stories, thank you. Fishing stories are stories of immigration, of indigenous oppression, of indigenous wisdom, of horrific sexism, of wanton cruelty to creatures of earth, of balance and respect for all life. Our abortion stories, our life stories, our love stories, our hate stories, our death stories, our funny, sad, and stupid, are timeless stories of the human experience played out on the ancient backdrop of pulling sustenance from the bountiful sea. And yes, some of them rhyme. Yo fucking ho. Thank you. And the OPB guys, well, Aaron, it's Aaron and April, and Aaron called last night and talked to me, and of course he's wanted to know what it's like to be a woman on a fishing boat. Would you mind handing me that pile of paper that's on that plastic envelope? Thank you, Kevin. And this is funny because I just wrote this incredibly long essay called What It's Like. And it's too long to read all at once, so I'm reading it throughout the gathering. This is the beginning. As a girl in upstate New York, I ate fish sticks on Fridays during Lent. The picture on the yellow box featured a man in a sou'wester, possibly with a pipe clenched between his teeth. The black and white photos at various maritime museums I visited are all of men, strong jaws, short hair, in dark sweaters and trousers, leaning on company boats or gathered on piers mending nets. I crewed on commercial fishing boats out of Alaska starting when I was 18 years old. In 1986, my older sister Molly wanted to fish for black cod. She called me in to replace her on board the 58-foot limit seiner Sunrunner as a greenhorn cook on a salmon tender. You guys know what a salmon tender is? No? Okay. Salmon tender goes around to boats or set net sites and picks up fish, records the weights, sells groceries, gives you the weather, just basically is your link to town. So they have a contract with the processor, and they act as a buying power for the processor out on the grounds. They used to give you beer with every delivery in 1986. And I knew guys that used to make 6 fish deliveries as often as they could. If you know Angela Grantham, those are her, the people who raised her. She turned out okay. We pulled anchor about 5 a.m. every day, a couple hours after the fishing boats traversed our circuit of the deep, beautiful fjords of Kodiak Island's west side, collecting fish from the set net operations. The set netters pitched their small catches into our brailing basket, gave us news of bears and other excitement that rippled through the bay, and then waved us on. The crews were often made up of families with children on the beach and teenagers in the skiffs. Maybe a quarter of them were women, red cheeks under kerchiefs, long hair pulled back, but otherwise clad exactly like the men in sweatshirts and rain gear. The set netters, when I turned 19 and no one on my boat remembered, the set netters gave me presents. One kind older woman welcomed us to shore for cake and gave me rhubarb from her garden, a treasured respite from canned food and tired groceries from town. It usually took most of the day to pick up from the small sites that ring Vicota and Uganic bays. We'd anchor up around 4 or 5 p.m. when the seine boats arrived for their turn, offloading salmon, getting their news and groceries, and Rainier, what we called vitamin R. The days are long in the north. We worked most days until midnight or 1 in the morning. We slept until 5 when the anchor chain rattled the bow, our hydraulic alarm clock, and did it all again. I received letters from college friends in Boston, Chicago, New York, and from family back home telling me of the jobs they worked for $5 an hour, teasing me for my outlandishly high wage of $100 a day. In July, I wrote them back saying that working 20 hours a day, I was making the same $5 per hour. But since I had nowhere to spend it, it just seemed like more. I was fascinated with the seine boats we picked up, which had almost no women on them. What would it be like to be a woman on a fishing boat? Not a skiff, not a tender. I vowed to find out. I was once a guest on a local morning radio talk show, and the female host, after asking the other fisherman guests questions like how long he had been fishing and where, asked me, "What's it like to be a woman on a fishing boat?" I replied, "I imagine it's a lot like being a woman on the radio." There was an awkward pause. I had a smug moment, satisfied at having exposed the patriarchy positioned at the center of that question, then lacerating shame at having used another woman to make my point. The thing is, I just wanted to be a person. I grew up in the 70s to the Marlo Thomas Free to Be You and Me soundtrack, whose lyrics told me I could be anything and do anything. I wore hand-me-down clothes that fit me mostly. Looking at old photos, I see today what might be called boys' clothes. Not a lot of pink, no glitter. T-shirts with numbers on them. Tough skins. When people ask me over and over, "What's it like to be a woman on a fishing boat?" I think, I just want to be a good deckhand. What does this question mean? I have thought about it a lot since becoming a performer who gets interviewed now and then. The interview often includes this question. It's confusing. What answer do people seek? What it's like to labor long hours, sleep in stinky forecastles, go without showers, be separated from loved ones and friendly faces? Well, why wouldn't the question just be, what's it like to be a deckhand? Why add the woman part? Is the question scientific? What it's like to deal with menstruation, PMS, pregnancy, or other biological experiences of uterus-having persons who may or may not be women? In a small space with no privacy beyond a sleeping bag? I can go into detail, but somehow I don't think the answer involves free bleeding or improvised menstrual situations if the boat unexpectedly doesn't get back to town for 8 weeks. I will tell you that I have composed many letters to the manufacturer of Mustang float suits about how they should add a zipper, because I have filled the hood more than once with pee. If you just turn it inside out and let the rain clean it. Clean. Is the question cultural? Are you asking me what it's like to have my pick of any man in any bar on any night? To never have to pay for a drink? To always expect sexual assault and think someone is a nice guy if it doesn't happen? To have the same sexual appetite as any other 23-year-old but be labeled a slut? Is the question political? About what it's like to be a member of an oppressed majority deeply behind the lines in male-dominated territory? If so, why not ask that question? Here I am, a female deckhand, now othered by the asking of this question. I'm trying to make a wage and be good at my job. It's harder for me to get my job even when I have more experience. There are a number of reasons why there are fewer jobs open to me. Sometimes skippers are married to people who tell them they aren't allowed to hire women. Sometimes skippers don't want to deal with the dynamics of having a gender-mixed crew. And sometimes skippers go to Alaska or live in Alaska and hang out in all-male environments because they don't particularly like women. That's okay. I get pitched this question and I'm supposed to open up about the hardships of this job to satisfy a question I think is lazy journalism. Will anyone hire me later or even interview me later if I whine on the radio about how tough I have it? I'm supposed to answer a question as broad as my fishing life. On stage last summer, I mentioned how common it is for the non-fishing public to tell me how dangerous fishing is. 3 women, I said, are killed every day in the United States in domestic violence situations. With statistics like that affecting every single woman, a fishing boat might be a safe place. After mentioning this, a man in the crowd began screaming at me and screamed at me for 5 minutes. I was nowhere near a fishing boat. What's it like being a woman in America? What's it like being a woman on the planet? Thanks.